I do a ridiculous amount of relativistic math to calculate our relative velocity at any given moment as perceived by my inertial reference frame, and then do Lorentz transformations to figure out when the light from his engines will drop out of the petroscope's perception range, just so I know how much longer I can see my friend in the distance? Wouldn't that be kind of pathetic? Yeah.
Hello and welcome back to Rehydrate. This season, we have read Andy Weir's Project Hail Mary. This is Season 10, Episode 4, Amaze, covering chapters 23 to 30. The hosts have varying levels of knowledge of this book. My name is Dan, and I have finished the book.
My name is Talia, and I have finished Hail Mary for the second time along with Rehydrate, and I am familiar with Andy Weir's other works.
My name is Priya, and I've just finished my reread as well of Project Hail Mary, and I have also read Andy Weir's other works.
So I think we are just going to jump right into the summary, and Talia's going to walk through what happened in this part of Project Hail Mary.
The last part of Hail Mary, of course. So Ryland's last and most impactful memory finally flashes back. He recalls Strat reeling in the wake of the death of the primary crew. Rather than call the tertiary backup with coma resistance, Strat decides that Earth's best chance is if they send Ryland grace. He refuses, claiming first that he could do more good on Earth than as an astronaut, and then, under her questions, breaking and admitting he was terrified to go to space. She ignores his protestations and drugs him into complete sedation, also administering an amnesiac so he will forget that he was unwilling. Ryland remembers promising Strat that he will defect upon remembering, but she is confident that he will do the right thing. On board the Hail Mary, Ryland is devastated to realize that she's right. More disappointment in the lab. Rocky and Ryland see that the Talmeba samples that they worked so hard to retrieve cannot survive the simulated environments of Erid and Sol. The scientist and the engineer do not give up and decide to systematically test what caused the death of the Talmeba and discover that it is nitrogen. The world of Erid has almost no biological sickness, and Rocky explains that the Eridian immune system is mostly based on heat. Ryland explains the theory of biological evolution and superbug breeding to Rocky, and together they decide to breed nitrogen-resistant Talmeba. Ryland devises a scientific protocol, and Rocky scurries to build the breeding farms out of xenonite. Eventually, they have a strain of Talmeba that will survive both Earth and Erid. Their mission done, the pair prepare to separate after their long journey together and exchange gifts. Erid will receive a laptop full of Earth science, and Earth will receive xenonite. Ryland finds celebratory vodka, and Rocky dresses up in an outfit that sounds good to Eridian senses. The experiment was not entirely perfect, and some of the astrophage fuel bays could not be cleaned of the predator and had to be jettisoned, as any direct exposure to the Talmeba would leave the ships powerless in space. Soon the Hail Mary is fueled up, Rocky boards his own ship again, and both friends realize that due to lifespan and time dilation, they will never meet again. Ryland sulks about his dwindling food supply and the loss of his friend, periodically turning on his ship's equipment to look for the last remnants of his friend in space. On one of these excursions, he realizes to his horror that the tiny beetle engines are dead, all the fuel eaten by the Talmeba. He tears apart the ship looking for a leak but finds none. In fact, the main breeder tanks used to develop the nitrogen-resistant strain are all infected. An experiment confirms his fears. Human epoxy and common plastic are effective barriers for Talmeba, but due to the generations of breeding, the new Talmeba can hide in the materials of the container to escape death by nitrogen. Ryland reflects on the limitations of playing fast and loose with science. He saves his ship in time, but Rocky's ship, with only xenonite on board, is stranded in space. Ryland is left with two options: fly home a hero, or send the Beatles home with Earth's salvation and rescue Rocky and Erid. After being given a second chance at survival, he once again faces the inevitability of death by starvation in space. Decision made, he hunts down the Blip A ship, and because no tracking systems can detect him, throws himself at the hull, hammering it for Rocky's acute senses. The friends are delighted to reunite and explain the horrifying discovery to each other. Ryland secures Rocky's ship, and Rocky promises that his people will build him a new ship. But Ryland reminds him that he will die, and Eridian food is toxic to him. Rocky comes up with a novel idea: eat the Talmeba, a biological alien species. In a flash forward, Ryland has been living on Erid for years. The heavy gravity has warped his body, and malnutrition weakened him before Eridian scientists cloned his own tissue for him to eat. He now lives in a life support dome and teaches Eridian children, reuniting his job as schoolteacher. One day, Rocky visits him and is bursting with good news. The scientists report that Earth's sun is once again shining with full luminance. Ryland cries. The two friends wonder about life on other planets, but remain on Erid, knowing Earth is safe.
Okay, let's just jump into impressions of this. And now we all have the same experience with the book, so I guess I don't need to always go first. Let's go with Priya. What did you think of this book on your subsequent reading here?
I think that there were a lot of things that I forgot because my brain just forgets a lot of the plot after I read a book, and it doesn't even like have to be a lot of time that passes. I forget pretty quickly. So it was nice to read all of the stuff that happens before the ending because I remembered the ending distinctly. And I remember at times I would like kind of tune out when he's doing all the math and science stuff and problem solving stuff. But the moment that he separates from Rocky, I'm like, oh no, I just need them to get back together again. And I guess that's like not even in a in the traditional romantic sense, but that is the romantic in me that's like, oh, I want the friendship to succeed in the story. I want the romance to succeed, even though in this case it's not a romance, but it is a friendship. I think all good stories have either a very strong friendship or a romance. And in this one, it's like all the way, it's a very, very strong friendship. And I was just like rooting for the friendship the whole time. And I was like, no, but what's going to happen? So like, I remember the first time that I read this, I was just rooting for him to go back and somehow reunite with Rocky the whole time, even if it means that Earth gets screwed over in the process. No, I was like, okay, those beetles are definitely going to serve a function, right? Like conveniently they're there. So yeah, I was like, and I was also kind of like feeling the dread of having to endure another like however many years he has to get back to Earth. It was like 4 years, right? He said it would be 4 lonely years. And that just kind of would be so hard after you wake up lonely, you find a friend, and then you're once again cast back into loneliness and uncertainty. So I think he did a really good job really getting the reader invested in this friendship. And so that's where my focus primarily was in the story at this point, from this point until the end.
So Brandon Sanderson, a famous fantasy author, has reviewed this book, and I read his review after I finished the book. And there's something I want to echo that he pointed out just about the idea. We've been speaking about likability and charisma and style the entire time, but just to sort of draw a distinct contrast, it almost feels like when Andy Weir is writing these books with all these, plot points, his optimism can't help but pull. It like really pulls the narrative. And so much of what we read is pretty dystopian if it's science fiction. And you almost get the sense, or I certainly do, both as I read and as I think about what it would be like if I were to try and write these things, that no matter which way you go, you get pulled into this darkness, you get pulled into the inevitability of certain logic. And just like you said last episode, Dan, you can't even believe that, this likable Rocky is going to die, So it does provide like this really strong heart throughout the entire book that things do work out and the alien isn't there to destroy you, at least not the alien that you care about. And even the alien that is going to destroy you, there's no malice in it and friendship will win out. So I really liked Priya's point about the friendship being almost like the romance of the book. I agree.
Yeah, I'll say from my perspective, I think overall very positive about the book, about most of the ending, which I'll get to in a second. I think there's a couple of things I thought were interesting, like twists on what I expected. The whole angle where where Grace was like forced to go against his will, and he realizes he's like actually a coward for not like sacrificing himself. I thought was an interesting twist. It changed his motivation, like in like the way that I think it kind of lent. Like it gave reason for his memory popping in when it popped in, yeah, like throughout the story. It seemed like a silly kind of plot contrivance, you know, like where you can remember specific things at specific times. But then like it all kind of comes together, which is good. Like there's an explanation for it, and there's a reason for it to like. So he didn't make that realization until the very end, where he had already like, you know, been a hero for the Earth and done all this like heroic stuff. I thought that was good. The friendship, obviously, I agree, like was very heartwarming, very like I was invested in it, you know, I think I was the opposite of Priya in that I wanted him to go home, and like realizing that like, yeah, it's gonna break up the friendship, but like I really wanted to see him get back to Earth and like really give it to Strat, you know, based off of all the stuff he kept talking about it. He's like, oh, what am I gonna say to her? Like, what am I gonna do? I really wanted to see that conversation and like I guess I also had like, I liked the idea of him going back to the Earth. Like, it would have been like what 20 something years later with like time dilation, right? I like that kind of stuff of seeing like the Earth evolving in a very quick time and seeing how the politics would have played out behind it. But anyway, it was still good, and yeah, overall like very very positive. One thing I did wanted to follow up from last time was that, and Talia, you touched on it too, was the with Rocky's like kind of death fake out, like where I thought it was obvious, and then again this time when when the Talmibo gets loose again, the first thing I thought, I was like, well, he's gonna have to go back to see Rocky, right? Because like it's like he didn't say it for a long time, and he kind of realizes it later. Is that like, oh, the same thing's gonna happen to his ship, and he's not gonna know because like it's gonna be embedded in his ship, and it's gonna get out and it's gonna eat his engines, right? But then I thought like maybe that is like a feature of the book, or maybe of the author's writing, and that like we're meant to figure it out before the character does. And then we kind of feel better, like more smart about ourselves, right? Like, I'm like, oh, I can figure out this mystery before the character even does. I don't know. Like, do you think that he meant to make it more obvious, or it's really meant to be a surprise there?
So I wanted to go back to what first I wanted to like address what Talia said about Brandon Sanderson commenting on this, because Brandon Sanderson is my favorite writer, and I've spent like the entire past year just like going through all his series and stuff. And what I love is that the way he writes is that there's a lot of darkness in his books, but there are moments of light and humor and levity that kind of always stop you from entering a really dark headspace when you're reading his books, even though he doesn't shy away from exploring really difficult things like mental illness and a lot of tragic character pasts. So I think that this commentary by Brandon Sanderson's like right in it's in character for him as a writer too. But then going back to what Dan said about whether we're meant to figure it out before the character does, and I think that it is a case where you will be one step ahead of the characters because they're like too much in the moment, right? They're too much in their own heads, and they're operating often on very little sleep, and they're operating with very limited resources for the situation that they're in. They're having to like kind of improvise as they go, whereas we as the reader have the big picture of it all. So even though it's interesting because we're still very much in Ryland's head the whole time. So still you get a sense that you know a little bit more than he knows, or you're a little bit of a step ahead of him, which is very interesting. And I think that is a little bit deliberate in the writing, because I never feel at any time that the writing is trying to present a twist that is a twist in the traditional sense. It's more of a scenario where you know he's going to figure it out, but the joy is in seeing how he figures it out. That's the sense that I get throughout with all of these conflicts. Like, he's going to do math on the page, he's going to do all these different explanations, and then you're going to understand how he figured out this problem that you knew was going to happen, or you knew he was going to figure it out.
I actually have a favorite part that I wonder if you guys will not share or disagree with. And for me, it's during the xenonite nitrogen testing with the mini farms, because I think I've tried to highlight in the summaries without making it, too spoiler heavy for Dan, but, now we're free. We do mention xenonite so much, and the fact that these farms are constructed of xenonite, and then we get walked through like every percentage that they survive. It's sort of like, well, I wouldn't be shown this much unless something else is happening, right? It's like the magician telling you to look over here, and then there's something happening on the other hand. So that sort of sneaking suspense was something that I think was probably my favorite part, for just the being able to like track along with the character. Because the fake out that he was actually a coward, I don't really know how to like land with that. I don't really feel like sad or happy about it, and I'm never got the sense that Rylan cared about Earth or his children, which he talks about all the time, but it's just completely hollow for me. So something that's very pressing and can affect like him and his friend is just so much more like resonant. How about you guys? Is that boring math stuff? Was that forgettable? Did you like it too?
I was like, yeah, I thought the whole explanation was well done, and it was interesting to me. I didn't catch it ahead of time. Like, I didn't guess that like that was what was happening. But it makes sense. Like when as soon as he said it, and as soon as he like even like I think the chapter ends with him going, "Oh my God, I got it," right? And then like they don't tell you what it is. No, like what is it? So
that happens all the time when I first read this book. It was like cliffhangers at every chapter.
Yeah, I thought that was really well done. I think the coward thing wasn't so much as a plot twist, but I think it was an interesting character. It's just an interesting character moment, and like, and a plot twist for himself, right? Like he kind of realizes, and like, oh wait, like I'm not a hero. I'm just some guy who didn't even want to go. So like, I thought it was just like an interesting like inversion into like the normal trope of like how this would have come about. Because like in a normal book, like the Dubois and Shapiro would have died, and then he would have volunteered and be like, all right, I'll do it for my kids or whatever, right? So I thought that it was good. The one quibble I will have that I kind of alluded to earlier is that I liked everything in the one except for the very, very end where he becomes a school teacher for Eridians. And I was like, come on. I rolled so hard when I read that, and it's like
the wizard, the wonderful Wizard of Oz.
like, oh my God, like,
and he gets to play the keyboard and make Eridian sounds. It's moving on the audiobook.
Yeah. The thing that I thought was cool is like the last chapter was like it's not numbered in the book. It has like the Eridian numbers, right? The symbols for it was like chapter whatever like chapter 30, but it was like written in Eridian. That was cool. And he keeps like mentioning, like he more casually mentions like Eridian stuff, like in the book, because it's like a couple years later or something, right? I thought that was really good. Like I was interested in like how they built the dome for him and all this stuff, and I was like, oh, that's cool. Like that would have been a satisfying ending. But then like the very end where he goes to see his school children, I was like, oh no, that it was too cheesy for me.
So it was actually, I think, 16 years later, or something like that, if I'm remembering
is it that much
correctly.
longer?
Yeah, it's been a while. So he's been there for a while, and that is the whole reason why he gets an update from Earth, because it's been a while. Because I think he said that the beetles were going to take probably 13 years to get to Earth. So, or was it 13 years? Unless I'm mistaken.
I feel like it was shorter.
I don't remember numbers very well at all, but I think it was 16 by the time that he finds out that
because they have to travel there, then the light has to reach them, so it is a while.
Okay, right, that makes sense. So I think I'm gonna have to disagree that I don't hate the fact that he's teaching these little Eridian kids, because he's going to get extremely bored living on a planet that is not his planet, on an alien planet, and everything is like he's the only human. So, like, what is he going to do with his time? And
He's Yun Tianming.
what's that?
He's like Yun Tianming, teaching the children.
Yes. I thought of that too. And so I thought that it was natural for him to teach the kids. And it also kind of seeds the idea of what if in the future there is contact between these two alien races being humans and Iridians in the future, then Iridians will know how to communicate with humans in the future. So that was like kind of an idea that I had, like, that I could see being seeded with why he's teaching the Eridian kids. And also there are some things that that human scientists have figured out that Iridians haven't figured out that he's kind of teaching them now, right? So that made sense to me beyond just having a cheesy little heartfelt moment of like, look, he's gone back to being a teacher on a different planet. So it made like narrative sense to me. Now, regarding him kind of being a coward before and now he's not a coward, I didn't take that to be cowardice. I took it to be like any normal human's response, right? I thought that he had already gone past his own personal threshold for how much he's going to do when he decided that he's going to help with like the project and with the research. When he decided to study the astrophage, when he saw that his kids would suffer if he didn't do anything. So I think he had already gone outside, like way outside of his comfort zone already. And then he continues working on the project, but then to kind of get like bamboozled at the last moment and be like, well, actually now you're going. I think that if they had shown him being like, yeah, you know what, I'll go, that would have felt a little bit more unrealistic to me than if he had the response that he did have, which is to be extremely shocked and reluctant to go, or refusing to go. And that creates a neat, I guess you could say it's a little too neat, but it creates a character arc, at least, where he starts off being the guy who didn't want to go and was forced to go. And then he makes the choice at the end of like with full cognition and with all his heart in it that he's going to go back despite knowing that he would die. So that kind of completes his character arc in a sense. It might be too neat, but
it reminds me just what you were saying, Priya, of the like the meme or the Twitter saying of like there's no stronger bond than that between a dad and the dog he never wanted. So he becomes so deeply attached to this mission. So it almost doesn't matter that he didn't want it in the first place.
That's true. That's a really good comparison.
Not something I thought about whilst reading, but again, I've said this before. You bring more like poetic meaning and purpose to these words than the author does. So I'm like, yeah, Priya's right.
Whoa, high praise. But I think he did think through these things in terms of creating good characters. So even though there are some parts of the story that we can critique, I think at the end of the day, for me, character-driven stories are always my favorite stories. And if you can get me to care about the characters, I would forgive a lot of different problems with a story. And I think that's what this story gets me to do, where even if I'm like, well, this could have been not this, I still think, okay, well, at least it gives me two characters that I deeply ended up caring about by the end of it. So that makes for a good story for me.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I had a question for you, both of you, and just to get your opinion. So would you consider this book to be hard sci-fi? He referred to it as much when, like, I after I finished it, I looked at like some interviews and stuff, which I want to talk more about too. But he also referred to it as hard, or someone referred to it as hard sci-fi, and when reading it, I didn't even think about it as being hard sci-fi because like the character drivenness of the book seemed to be more important than the science. But I guess there was a lot of science on the page. So I don't know. Like, what do you guys think? Would you consider it hard sci-fi?
It is hard sci-fi because there's a lot of scientific concepts that are kind of explored on the page. Not hard sci-fi is when the scientific situation is just kind of the backdrop of the story. So,
I think for the exact reason it's not hard sci-fi.
what do you mean?
Because for me, like, reading this book did not make me think deeply about scientific principles at all. It was like a buddy cop road trip story.
Yeah, it was more
where
like
the science is
justification. It was like, yeah, background justification for like how things are working. But like the main thrust of the story, yeah, was the relationship.
What's interesting, I think, is that it works on both levels. That it gives people who are not readers of hard sci-fi something to latch onto, but it also gives people who are readers of hard sci-fi enough science on the page that keeps them interested. The reason I think that it still is hard sci-fi is because the plot very much hinges upon the scientific realities of what the world is facing and what's happening situationally around them. From my experience of reading not hard sci-fi, it's when you have like a dystopian world that has faced like the aftermath of a scientific thing gone wrong, and then the characters have to kind of navigate that world now. And there's very little actual science happening, but science is kind of the backdrop of the world. That something happened that was a scientific anomaly, and now the characters have to kind of navigate themselves around it. And now there's also some books that are categorized as sci-fi that are technically falling under a genre, or maybe it's a subgenre known as space operas. So that's its own separate category. But I still think that it wouldn't be wrong to call this hard sci-fi, even if the reader is not thinking deeply about scientific concepts while reading it. It's more a question of how it's written. And this kind of subverts that hard sci-fi trope a little bit, or the genre a little bit, by giving you a very heartfelt friendship in a very scientific scenario, which is kind of rare to see in sci-fi.
But so many of these challenges and obstacles and plot points could take place in a different landscape and be completely unaffected. Whereas I feel like the things that give narrative and depth and challenge to science fiction books that are categorized in that direction are the actual scientific principles that they're examining or trying to probe to think more clearly about. Like when we have a city that's orbiting a black hole, we think, how would civilization have to evolve? Or when, in the three body problem, there's the Great Ravine, and it's gestured to, but it's never stated that there's clearly been like a climate reckoning. There's been some geological reckoning that's caused desertification and has caused humanity to reconsider how they live. And to me, that's far more science fiction because it explores science and pushes it with like a what if question. And what I found here was more like explanation of science fact, not science fiction, like how you can determine the volume of a given metal or the gravity given a piece of string. These are not things that like push us forward, push us to think more deeply about science. It does make, I guess, science approachable, but to me, it does not remind me of science fiction. But we disagree a lot.
That's interesting. Well, what did you think? What did you think of the Martian, though? In that case, hard sci-fi or not?
That I found actually a little bit more like science fiction. And I'm not totally sure if I can back that up and justify it, except for the fact that I do think that those scenarios are like very influenced by the environment. Like you are in a place where you need to grow enough food to live. And whereas here the answer when you need to grow enough food to live is like, I don't know, just eat this alien. There it's like, all right, well, if I cut the potato and then cut each eye and then separate all the eyes and give them all the optimal, watering treatment, how can I survive long enough by using what is, like actual probable science and then pushed in a direction of what if? And that makes me think like, what else could he have done this with? Like, how would I have solved that problem? Whereas this is like Rocky says, you can just eat Talmiba. And he's like, it's kind of sweet. doesn't keep me healthy. Anyway, off we go. And it just does not feel very sciencey to me.
Yeah, I can see an argument for either way. It's just like, it was interesting to me that I didn't even think about it until he mentioned it, and I was like, oh yeah, I guess like maybe it could be considered hard sci-fi because like there are a lot of equations and stuff. But I think this discussion around like what is the nature of hard sci-fi is also very interesting. But it's good that like he's messing with, if anything, he's messing with the formula, right? Like he's messing with the, we all, I think we all would recognize that Remembers Earth Past is hard sci-fi, and there's no character, there's no real characters there. But here, like the characters like are very much in the forefront, but then it's in the backdrop of a very sciencey kind of the other solutions are science based, right? So it's good that he's messing with the genre there.
It's definitely like attacking the genre or in conversation with the meta, however you want to say it. Like, I do think it's written by someone who clearly likes science fiction a lot and has his own take on it.
Yeah. And side note, I after I finished this book, I went and watched The Martian because I didn't want to get like quote unquote spoiled on his style or whatever, because like I didn't anyway like
Really?
that I'm crazy like that, so I watched that too. And I'm interested to know like the differences in like the book versus the movie in that one, but it's for another season, I guess, maybe. One other topic I wanted to bring up, like after I finished this book, I watched some interviews and like read some stuff from Andy Weir himself just to kind of get his perspective on it. And he seems like a really optimistic guy, which is interesting, because normally sci-fi, not normally, but like a lot of sci-fi stuff I've read seems to be more dystopian than optimistic. I guess do either of you have like a preference to like that kind of mindset towards the world building, like a more optimistic one versus a more dystopian one? And what's more interesting to read, I guess?
For me, it's optimistic for sure, because I think that in part, or maybe it's more the case these days, that I read to kind of escape the grim realities of day-to-day existence. So I want something that both gets me to think more deeply, but at the end, it gives you something like hope to kind of hold on to, that, humans are capable of imagining or grappling with so many high-level problems. I think that's what sci-fi shows you, that there are all of these really, really insane problems that humanity either currently faces or could face, but that the mind can conceive of a solution, or the mind can conceive of a positive ending for these kinds of scenarios. And that's always a little bit more interesting to me, as long as that sort of an ending feels earned. Because a lot of the times, if you make it too easy all throughout the story for the characters to get to where they need to be, then in the end, you don't really feel like that solution is earned by the end. I very much appreciate the fact that Andy Weir repeatedly imagines an impossible scenario, and then he shows like one dude or a couple of dudes like figuring out the solution through an almost impossible partnership or an impossible amount of work, and they find a solution and they get to where they need to in the end. And they solve a big problem and they also solve a personal problem. So I think that is definitely the sort of story that I tend to want to see more of, especially within this particular genre, because this genre doesn't always have happy endings. And what you can classify the 3-body problem ending as triumphant and maybe hopeful on a larger scale, but I think on a personal scale, you do get a lot of loss at the end, and that kind of dampens my spirits a little bit.
I will say I did read an AMA from Andy Weir also, and he seemed to be very on this. Like he specifically, his quote is that "I'm done with dystopia. I'm a positive person with a very, very positive view of humanity." So it's interesting. This book was written from what I've read. It was finished before the pandemic even. So like even in the midst of all that, and like but like all of this press and stuff happened like after the pandemic, because like that's when the book came out. I thought an interesting quote was that he thought that humanity is like on a better trajectory now, and he'd much rather live in 2020 versus 1920. He says he's said that in a couple different ones, and he also said that like he thinks COVID-19 will be the last pandemic, and so like I wonder if you still think that today, because like I am very like down on humanity in the past like couple years, like for very American reasons. But I don't know. Like, I wonder if I wonder if his next book will have the same themes of optimism, or maybe he's still optimistic. I'm not sure. It just, yeah, the whole optimism seems like kind of even naive at this point. But I don't know. Maybe I'm getting too political.
I don't recall our original question, but I'm fascinated hearing.
It was like
guys-
optimism versus dystopian, like just in general. Like, I guess which you prefer. Like, what stories you like to read?
I mean, I can say all day and all night that I prefer like darker and just deeper and dystopian ones. But honestly, like if I look at my own patterns, I've read Hail Mary just over and over. It was such a like comfort read. It was so easy. It doesn't like challenge big, dark, heavy things, and sometimes that serves a purpose. So, kind of trying to play both sides, I guess, but I truly do mean it.
I just wanted to agree with Dan first about the very American reasons for being down on humanity. But I think that's why we need this type of optimism even more, so that we don't kind of completely like wallow in despair. I do feel like we need these stories more in times when we're more prone to falling into a state of despair given the state of the world. I think these stories kind of ground us and they pull us out of our own heads a little bit. And now, if ever, it's the time for a story like this, is what I think.
Yeah, I mean, like honestly, like when I was watching, I'll go spoilers for The Martian too, because everyone, I guess, if I'd like when spoiler warning for The Martian. So like at the end of it, like when or I guess like sort of in the middle, the endish part, right, where the Chinese like meet up with the Americans to like like have this big effort, and I was like, yeah, humanity. It's like, so like you feel like, and then like when they actually rescue him at the end, like it's very, yeah, it's like you kind of like, oh man, that's so great for us. So like it just, but that sense of optimism just, it seems like even just kind of, it's good, it feels good, but it just feels also kind of naive, that like in reality, like that never would happen. These countries aren't going to work together. Like you're going to have all this infighting because we're going to have an idiot president who like says something stupid and like puts off our allies, and it's just like won't it like those kind of things I think would in reality these days like wouldn't happen. So I have like a mixed reaction to them of being like feeling good about the story, but then like also like realizing that in reality it would never actually happen.
If you guys will just indulge me for a moment before I let you move on to your next points, what you're saying kind of reminds me of this quote that is in Sanderson's, the last book of the first arc of his Stormlight Archive, which recently came out in December. Well, not so recent anymore, actually. Last December it came out. He wrote in his book, "This was humankind at its best, standing against the tides of darkness with ink and pen." And I think that whenever someone presents an optimistic view in a story that deals with problems that seem insurmountable, I think that that's what they're doing. And like Sanderson always has like one of the best quotes for like any scenario. So I always keep coming back to like his quotes to kind of also guide me through life a little bit at this point. So what you were saying kind of just reminded me of that. That's the only reason why it feels hopeful versus naive to me.
I was just curious if either of you noticed or cared about the little dip into Eridian Civilization that we got, like that thrumming thing that they do to like think as a hive. I find far more interesting than their biology. And I was curious if we were going to stay on planet to like maybe get a little bit more integrated into the book, and I don't know, it feels like sequel territory. But maybe I'm just thinking too movie forward. I was just curious if you had any thoughts on that.
Yeah, I would have loved to hear more about Eridian society in general. Like, I also found on Reddit, Andy Weir actually like linked a document that has like the entire backstory and like all of his like research notes, or quote unquote research notes about like the Iridian biology and like and also like the political structure. Like he seemed kind of amorphous about the political structure, and because he didn't really write about it that much. But yeah, I would have loved to hear more about like Iridian culture, and like I'd be happy to hear another story written in that world, because like having having to know like how that whole culture evolved, because they're like obviously like any culture not gonna be a monolith, how they and not everyone's gonna be rocky there, right? They're gonna all like kind of act differently. So hearing more about that I would definitely be interested in hearing that. And I think even Andy Weir made a hint that there is a sequel in the works. So maybe, yeah, especially if the movie is popular.
I thought the society part was just really a little unexpected and cool to jump into, because again, we see such a like non-nuanced, one-sided take on human society where, bossy lady says stuff in a loud voice, so it just happens. And then again, we get like so much more explanation and curiosity about the Eridian society. So I thought that was interesting.
I'd love for there to be a novella. Like, it feels like novella style information to kind of like maybe like how did Ryland spend those 16 years on Erid? Like, how did that turn out for him? How did he get from like landing there to the point where they're able to like build him this dome and start creating things like earth things for him to have, making light bulbs for him, for instance, when they don't understand light because they don't need to see light, or they don't see light. So all these little things, I feel like he could have so much fun with them in a novella, or knowing him, he could probably stretch it into a whole book.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, like a whole book might be a bit much without like a separate plot, right? But yeah, like you said, a backstory of like you can imagine like the story of like him landing on Erid, and like what the first like not first contact with the species, but like like the first like real contact with like the planet would be an interesting one, and like what their reaction is, and like maybe different factions to like determine like what their reaction to him is, and that kind of thing. But he's also like a hero to them, so maybe that would have been okay with him.
I'd be very okay with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other points about this book? Okay, well, I want to do one exercise with you guys, where this is the 10th season of Rehydrate, and we've gone through a bunch of books. So I want to go rapid fire and go through each book that we've read and see if you think that this book is better than that book. And I'll go through each of us. So our first season was Three Body Problem. I'll go with Talia first. Three Body Problem, better or worse than this book?
Book 1, Three Body Problem.
Yep.
The worst of the Remembrance of Earth's Past. Better. It's better.
So you think Three Body Problem is better than Project Hail Mary?
Correct.
Okay. How are you, Priya?
Hands down, Three Body. We can't stop talking about it, can we? Like, it's nothing is ever going to compete. Like that, it kind of broke its genre. Like I have had a hard time finding anything that's going to top that. I haven't actually found anything that's going to top that. So everything else I read.
If you know anything, write us. Tell us what it is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know like Talia, you had problems with Three Body Problem to its length and some of its inclusion. So I wasn't positive, but I kind of assumed that's where we would go.
The worst of the Remembrance of Earth's Past trilogy is still head and shoulders above so many books.
Head and shoulders above. Interesting. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that too. But yeah.
We're supposed to be rapid fire, and I feel like we're sabotaging time.
So I'm gonna go super rapid fire for Death's End and Dark Forest. I'm assuming because we both like those books better, that we also like those much better. So I'm going to skip to Foundation, which I think is probably more interesting, and I'll go with Priya because I think I can know your answer.
What are we holding Foundation up against?
Against Project Hail Mary, yeah.
Yeah, Project Hail Mary. I didn't like Foundation. I'll be very honest.
Yeah. How about you, Talia?
Certainly more pleasurable to read Hail Mary.
Okay. Does that mean you like it better?
Uh,
Or
if if pressed, I still have to say I like Asimov better because there's like certain sentences, if not the entire book as a whole, but there's certain passages or sentences that I can pull out and then really admire, and that's something I admire about authors. Whereas they're like, if I recommended Hail Mary and someone pulled out a sentence and read it back to me, I'd be like, that's embarrassing. Don't associate me.
all right, so you're on Foundation. I'm also going to go with Foundation over Hail Mary. I like Foundation a lot more than I thought it was. Maybe not the, yeah, even the first book, all three of them. Like I'm taking them as a unit of three because that's how we did this season. But loved it. I've reread it a couple times since we did that, and I went back and finished a lot of the subsequent books. So yep, I'll go with Foundation there too. Next we had Dune. Talia, you recommended Dune. So which one?
Yes. I think everyone should read Dune. It's like the Bible. I think it's a necessary piece and I really enjoy it. And like I said on the pod, I've read many of the subsequent chapters and sequels rather of Dune, all the way up to Chapter House. So I prefer Dune.
How about you, Priya?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to say Dune because of the prose writing and complexity. But sorry, this is supposed to be rapid fire, but I just cannot.
It's okay.
But if I'm talking about like characters I care about, I care more about Rocky than any character in Dune. So there you go.
That's because you haven't read about Leto too. All right. I gotta read God Emperor, guys.
So I'm gonna go with Hail Mary over Dune. I enjoyed it a lot more. I mean, not that it didn't. I think in the very beginning, I was like, I think I had like, I don't know, like a negative reaction to Dune. It was too much, too fast. But I got into it, I think, later in the book. But Hail Mary was like a more enjoyable read the entire time, and I think Dune did not. I'll say it this way: like I was not ready to go and read the second book. I wasn't that interested. Where if there was a second Hail Mary book right now, I would read it. So I'm going to go with Hail Mary for that over Dune. And then finally, we have Hyperion. And I'm going to go first and say Project Hail Mary like a million times better than Hyperion. I did not like Hyperion. Talia.
I'm gonna have to go with Hyperion.
Interesting.
I liked it more because there's passages in that are, again, I'm back to like, if you have succeeded and like reached this high point, you can be evaluated on those high points. And I found that in Dan Simmons's Hyperion.
How about you, Freya?
I feel like ever so often I encounter somebody who loves Hyperion and I wonder. I didn't like Hyperion at all. I don't care about the strike. I don't care about any of it. I definitely like Project Hail Mary a million times better. And I do also think that every other book that we read so far together, of all those books, I've enjoyed all of them more than Hyperion.
Same. I think the same thing. Like I thought for sure after we read it, like I would just see like negative reactions all over the place, but everyone seems to like it. And I was like, did you guys read the same book? I don't get it. Yeah. Anyway, we have a whole season to complain about Hyperion, so go listen to those. Yeah, I think that's it. I think we did it. So thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much for Priya and Talia for joining us this season. Thanks for listening. Please check out rehydrate.space for release episodes, reading lists, pronunciation guides, all the stuff we put up there. Leave comments by emailing us at rehydrate@fastmail.com, on Mastodon at rehydrate@mass.to, and on Blue Sky at Rehydrate. And please join us next season where we don't know what we're doing yet, but we'll figure it out and let you guys know. Thank you very much. Hey everyone. So during our discussion around optimism versus dystopian science fiction, we of course went on a big long tangent about the Three Body Problem series, the last book being Das End, and gotten into very spoiler territory around the ending of that book, basically talking about the ending in detail. So I want to give everyone a spoiler warning and some space to feel free to skip this part if you have not read those books, because we very much encourage you to do so. But if you have and you're interested in our perspectives on the end of that story versus how it lines up with Project Hail Mary, keep listening. Thanks.
I keep coming back to Three Body Problem because I think that I enjoyed that series so much, even though it does a lot of things very differently from what I normally prefer. So, you know, you can cut this out if it's a spoiler. We don't want it in here, but it gives you a very, very tragic ending. And I don't like tragic endings, but still, I recommend that series to everybody. Like, I mean, the most tragic ending, right? Nothing hopeful at the end.
I would disagree with that. I actually think that it's more of a optimistic ending, but I think it's up for interpretation.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm very adamantly of the opinion that it is a very tragic ending, but like, you know, the characters that I'm rooting for to meet each other at the end never meet at the end. Like, the universe flattens itself out.
Yeah, but okay, so yeah, I'll put big spoiler warnings around this whole section.
Not for this book, but for
for a different book that people know that we talk about anytime. So the reason I think it's optimistic is because, like, at the end, like, she leaves the pocket, or they leave the pocket universe, and they have the whole, like, world to explore. So I see that as more hopeful ending, right? They can kind of make their own way in the universe, and, like, who knows what could happen after that. Obviously, there's a lot of tragic events that happen up to that point, like you mentioned, but the reason I see the actual ending is because, like, one, humanity has a chance to, like, have to be discovered, and, like, the history is not completely lost because, like, she leaves the fishbowl there, and then also, like, Changxin and who's the other guy? I forgot his name. I should remember. Guan Yifan, is he the other guy? Yeah, so they go out and, like, they have with Sofan, and they explore the universe in, like, a wholly different time period. So
I agree with both of you, or I guess disagree with both of you. I don't know. I can't decide which one. I think the ending is deep, but I mean, so triumphant. Not necessarily on the personal level that Changxin and Guan Yifan get to explore a new universe, but just on the sheer triumph of humanity. They have preserved a seed of civilization not through the centuries or the millennia, but through geologic eras. And they've escaped into a pocket universe due to unlikely collaboration with the only other species that they knew about in a hostile universe. It's an incredible triumph. And then they were survivors long enough to be noticed by other forces in the universe who recorded their final wishes in a script that modern humans would be able to recognize. I think it's an unbelievable arc that takes us, like, way beyond ourselves. And I thought it was absolutely beautiful. And I think the beauty is what makes it hard for me to determine whether it's sad or hopeful. It's just so beautiful.
I think that is why, like, the way that you just described it, that is why ultimately in the end I ended up liking the series so much, and I was satisfied with what it did in the end, because it's beyond the scope of any imaginative story that I've ever read in my life. So, like, for what it does in terms of that, I was, like, just blown away. But I think that most stories that you come across are not on the level of Three Body Problem, especially within this genre, that you'll have an ending that is either hopeful or one that is not. A lot of the apocalyptic sci-fi books will often give you not a very optimistic worldview.